What happened is necessity becomes the mother of invention. And all of a sudden, we're in acceleration mode. And that created an incredible drive for innovation.
We are living through times of tremendous change. For many industries, they're experiencing disruption. But for some industries, they're experiencing disruption and growth. Whether it's power generation, manufacturing, oil and gas and renewables, and even electricity and telecom, these are especially interesting industries. Why? Well, because many of them are just now going through digital transformations. The pandemic has put new pressures on them, resulting in multi-year-long projects that are now completed in just months. What's interesting about these industries is that they each influence the quality of our everyday lives. If all of these industries have successful digital transformations, if they practice data for good and begin to work in concert with each other, this means an improved quality of life for us all. One of the people leading that charge to better data stewardship and digital transformations with ROI is Patrick Byrne, the CEO of GE Digital. A little over a year ago, Patrick stepped in to run GE Digital, which focuses on those industries we mentioned: power generation, manufacturing, oil, gas, and renewables, and electricity and telecom. Today, we're interviewing Patrick to learn more about his perspective on where these industries are headed. You'll hear about Patrick's journey, how he helped his 4,000-person team transition to remote work, and the principles of partnership and culture that help GE Digital and their clients thrive. Let's jump into today's episode of Hidden in Plain Sight with Patrick Byrne, the CEO of GE Digital.
This season of Hidden in Plain Sight is brought to you exclusively by our friends at Splunk, the Data to Everything platform. Splunk helps organizations worldwide turn data into doing. It's time for data to be more than a record of what happened. It's time to make things happen. Learn more at Splunk.com or by clicking the link in our show notes.
Patrick, welcome to the show.
It's great to be here.
I'm excited to talk to you today. These are tumultuous times, but for GE Digital, there's a lot of opportunity. So you are the person to talk to. If you are introducing yourself to an audience that might not know you or be familiar with your work, how do you usually do that and tell about your role at GE Digital?
Yeah, well, thanks so much, Chad. I really look forward to this discussion. So I'm the CEO of GE Digital, and GE Digital is a software division within GE Corporation. And, GE is a storied company, over 100 years, remarkable company of engineering and operational capabilities, and serving the world in very significant ways. The energy markets we're in, the airline industry we support, the healthcare businesses we're in, and the GE Digital software business, the business that I lead, is really focused on these industrial markets and the role of software. And the role of software to provide transformational capabilities for how those businesses operate, how they serve their customers, how they really generate insights to run more efficiently and effectively. And so it's an exciting opportunity, industrial software, and there's no better place to do that than GE, where we've got really tremendous brand and global reach and technology in the company.
For sure. And when it comes to the verticals that you're responsible for overseeing or that GE Digital focuses on, it looks like we have power generation, manufacturing, oil and gas, electric utilities and telecom. And also you just mentioned GE's aviation software business, which recently transitioned under your leadership as well. Could you talk to us a little bit about where those industries are at, especially when it comes to, like oil and gas? Not many people are familiar that the U.S. just became the lead exporter or lead producer of both oil and natural gas. So this is a really exciting time. Tell us some about the industries that you head up.
Yeah, sure. So and each of these has really got this narrative associated with digital transformation. One of the things we try to focus on at GE Digital is putting industrial data to work. So how can we put industrial data to work in these markets? So let's start with grid operations. The electric grid is the world's largest man-made machine. It's very complex, and most of the world's electricity is generated by 400 grid operators. So these are public utilities, and of course, it's keeping the lights on. And what's happening in that marketplace is really a result of decarbonization and renewables, and the movement to a variety of energy sources, not just coal or gas, but also there's nuclear, there's wind, there's solar. And as a result of that really growing complexity of energy sources and then the regulatory environment, it's really a very important place for digital to play, to orchestrate how that grid operates. Of course, it's always got to be running, it's always got to be on, but it's also got to be very efficient and really manage these kind of new renewable sources in a way that makes the grid perform. And so that's one of our top priorities, is that marketplace. In the power generation, again, a marketplace going through transition, along with oil and gas, a place where regulations really matter a lot. Digital transformation there is how companies are orchestrating everything from outages to asset performance to gaining visibility across their whole enterprise. So it's not just a gas turbine, but it's how the whole power plant works. And we're right in the middle of that with key applications. In manufacturing, what's happening there is really the end-to-end visibility of the supply chain. Just take the COVID example. When COVID hit, many of those supply chains, which are international supply chains, you've got to be sure that those supply chains are secure and performing. Meanwhile, the demand signal for consumer goods are moving all over the place. As all of us know, toilet paper peaked right after COVID hit, and other things are going up and down. But overall, the consumer packaged goods business, a lot of dynamics, and so software plays a key role in help manage that kind of visibility across plants, across regions, across the supply chain, out to the customers and the demand signal. And of course, all those are going through omni-channel now. They're all being driven by a variety of demand signals. In the aviation marketplace, this is a place where safety really matters and efficiency really matters. There's a lot of progress the aviation industry has made in the last 10 years of reducing fuel usage and becoming more efficient. And we have a premier database that tracks how all those airplanes have taken off and landed, how those assets have performed. And that really helps the airlines manage through operational transitions that are going on and how that fleet manages across the life cycle. Again, a premier database. And again, when you're inside GE, you see these very large databases, wind turbines, gas turbines, jet engines. We run big factories. So we're really in an ideal spot to be able to help that transformation happen. Those are some of the dynamics in our industries.
Sure. And when it comes to digital transformations, it's obviously a buzzword. However, many large organizations and enterprises right now are engaging in rapid digital transformations. They are either adjusting to remote work or they're transitioning to, get things into the cloud. And they're having to do this at a breakneck pace. So in my conversations, that seems to be one common thread, is that projects that were originally slated to take a couple years are now being undertaken and completed in a matter of months. I'm curious if you're hearing similar themes, similar trends, and if there are any client examples you can talk about too, about recent work that GE Digital is doing to aid with these digital transformations.
Oh, sure. So that's exactly right. So I think if you go back to January, before COVID, the COVID pandemic really created an impact, especially in the US, most people would have said, this digital transformation initiative we're doing will take a couple of years. What happened is necessity becomes the mother of invention, and all of a sudden we're in acceleration mode. And so I think it's for a couple of reasons. One is you had to keep operating with people working remotely, and that created really an incredible drive for innovation, for innovating the business process, using different software, figuring out how the organization would be constructed and could run. Many of these are regulated environments. Safety is very important. Data is proprietary. And so you had to actually operate these large organizations with more remote work. The second thing was that disruption associated with COVID meant that leaders that are leading operations technologies or IT technologies were looking for, how do we become more resilient? How do we adjust to the changing demand signals, the changing workforce? And meanwhile, people are working from home. And so it's a real catalyst. So that, I think those are the dynamics, and you're absolutely right. 2 years worth of progress has happened in 4 or 5 months in many markets. So here's one example. When we work with regulated utilities, we have a process we do where we do systems acceptance tests for new software, and it's a very rigorous process because this is operational software. You're running the grid with this every day. It absolutely positively has to work. And before that would have been a multi-week exercise, all on site, everybody's on site, and you're walking through each of those steps. And you're doing that to create maximum visibility, situational awareness, make sure that all the software is tied to all the operational processes. Well, now that has to be done with more people in more different places, but still in the same regulatory environment. So we did tremendous innovation with our customers to keep those upgrades happening. That meant remote work, that meant new business processes that had to be put in place. Now, if you go back some months ago, these customers would have said, no, we're not going to take that risk, we're not going to do that. But now we have a new streamlined process. We've used lean and some of our approaches to making sure that we're doing a good job sort of end to end on that through that process. But now it's created new standard work that we can apply in the future going forward in a far more versatile and resilient way because we've learned how to work. One other example I'd use in manufacturing. On all our products, we took them remote within 30 days. We allowed whatever was operational software that we could, we made it accessible, again, with high security requirements and everything else for many of our applications. In manufacturing, we really needed to allow our customers to get visibility across all their enterprises. Customers with 100 factories, customers with many complicated supply chains and changing demand signals. And we worked hard on that digital worker strategy with these clients, create that visibility, additional analytics tools, additional tools we used where we would move data into what we call our manufacturing data cloud, which allowed enterprise-wide risk management to be done more effectively. Those are a couple of examples, but it's absolutely, years got crunched into quarters, and I'm really proud of how the team worked and the feedback we've gotten from customers on our responsiveness, on our resilience, and on our innovation.
Right. And this is a little after, I guess we're approaching a year and a couple of months now in your tenure as CEO. So I'm curious to know, what has that been like, entering into this role, and then with COVID hitting and having to transition 4,000 of your team members to remote work? I'm sure that's been all over the place, but if you could sum it up or maybe share some stories about what it's like on your end, I'd be very curious to know about what that year has been like for you.
Yeah, so when I joined GE, I knew I was joining a company with tremendous talent and technology and global reach. And we very quickly in the first few months moved towards putting this organization together. This was previously 3 or 4 different parts of an organization we brought together into one cohesive whole in GE Digital. And that's a very exciting phase because we really established the mission. We put the leadership team together. This is a large-scale organization, over 1,000 R&D engineers. We're in all these geographies and product lines. So sort of pre-COVID, it was getting the organization set up and then starting to operate with a very clear focus on these vertical marketplaces and delivering value, delivering innovation, really understanding our customers' business priorities and what business outcomes we needed to focus on as we started 2021. And of course, in March, the world changed. The world changed for everybody. And I see the COVID transition as sort of in multiple phases. The first phase, which was the first few weeks to a month, call this phase 1, where we're really just trying to get people transitioned to working from home and stabilized and productive, and sort of reorient people that, hey, this is going to be a while. This is the new way of working. And I think we did a great job on that very quickly. Our team's very resilient. And we were able to keep programs on track, keep customer commitments, keep our key operating metrics. So that's phase one. The second phase really came as a result of customer demand, which is what are the new requirements? Where do we need to redefine what success looks like with our customers? And that's a very important thing when you go through these kinds of transitions is whatever you had in mind in January, maybe some of that is lower priority. Maybe there's some new priorities. And I mentioned some of those in how we've had to be resilient and focused on business outcomes in a COVID world. So what are the new priorities? What does success look like? And that's what we've been working on since that time is ensuring we are very focused on customers and what their new realities are. Now that we're adjusted and we're stabilized, let's get focused externally. And of course, we started to do that as rapidly as possible. The third phase, I think, is still emerging, which is what does the new normal look like longer term and what's permanent associated with the way work is being done in a post-COVID world. And that's really about innovation. And so in each of those phases, setting up the organization, stabilizing through the COVID, getting refocused on what does success look like, and now starting to look at emerging innovation priorities. That's what I've been working on with the management team over the last year.
Sure. And when it comes to those emerging priorities or projects, are there any examples you can share? I'm curious to know about how you're thinking about the future and generally too, how you're thinking about data. This is a show where we talk about data a lot.
Yeah.
And if you could maybe share some conversations or insights in that would be fantastic.
Yeah, so I've sort of mentioned some of these already. If you think about what's happened as a result of COVID, is it's accelerated digital priorities and made it more and more important that they're enterprise level. You can really get enterprise visibility. So in the grid, it is about how do you gain visibility across the grid enterprise as you're orchestrating renewables. And the use of data, the use of grid data, what's coming off the grid, but also the assets that are operating within the grid, the utilization of those assets. So those are some of the conversations we're having with those customers. And of course, that's a combination of sort of COVID-driven remote work combined with this long-term trend of decarbonization. So that's a place we're focused on. Another one I mentioned a little bit earlier about the use of data across manufacturing enterprises. Again, if you're running 100 factories and you have dynamics among suppliers and customers, you really want to use that data to optimize and do risk management. That's a key aspect. I think in the COVID world, risk management and how data is used to reduce risk is an emerging and important priority. It already was, but now it's more present because of what COVID has brought upon us. So again, when you're running a manufacturing plant and you're optimizing it and analyzing it, I think there's a new appreciation for how are you managing the supply chain risk, or how are you managing the channel risk, which is what if the demand signal changes and you've got to change the mix of the products you're building. That's the sort of way data is being used, again, enterprise level. Now, the good news on both of those is we're in a great position with big customers working through those kind of priorities.
Right. And when it comes to manufacturing, there are a lot of new initiatives around robotics and building things here in the US. So depending on how you count it, since 2017, there have been about 480,000 new manufacturing jobs that have been added. Obviously, over the last couple of months, it's been tumultuous. But Patrick, I'm curious, what are you hearing? What are you seeing when you're working with manufacturing companies? Are there a lot of new startups? What's that movement like in that industry?
Yeah, what I would say is that people are thinking about how to compete in manufacturing with these digital technologies, with control systems, digital technologies, automation. So they're really creating competitive advantage by creating linking those operational capabilities. There's this thing about digital readiness, and there's this issue in manufacturing, not issue, but really a contrast that's emerging. So the digital haves and the digital have-nots. And how do you ensure your organizational organization, as a manufacturer, has high digital readiness. A bunch of this comes down to how you govern data, what roles and responsibilities are across the operations teams and the IT teams, how you manage and govern that data, how that data is used throughout the automation chain, throughout the business transformation and business process optimization. And the companies that are very good at this, and there's some very good companies in the US on this, who are large companies who have teamed up with the best suppliers, and they've brought in the talent, and they've integrated that to create competitive advantage. They've leveraged digital readiness. They're on the second or third generation of optimizing their operations. And so what's interesting about it is, as that manufacturing is growing in the US, those places are embracing these best practices. How do you make sure you have high digital readiness? How do you make sure that you've got good data governance and so on? Because the competitive advantage is going to accrue to the companies who have those capabilities built in operationally into their talent base, into their business process. Because it's not just digital transformation, it's business process transformation to drive different outcomes. And those outcomes are costs, or their customer satisfaction, or their additional revenue, or their enterprise risk management.
Right. And as an industry too, there is terminology for dark data. People call it different things, but generally many corporations and groups are starting to become aware that they're not really analyzing a lot of their data. They might not be categorizing it or pulling it in effectively. And there's really a wealth of insights waiting there. So are there any examples of clients, or maybe internally, of how GE Digital is thinking about getting value from dark data or data that you previously were unaware of? Any examples you can share there?
Yeah, sure. So there's lots of examples. It's not uncommon in a grid operation to only use 10% of the available data. That's not uncommon. So you think about all that data, 10,000 assets. How are those assets performing? All the demand signals, and especially now in grid renewables, where you've got in the distribution network, you have generation. If you put a solar panel on your house and you're now pushing power into the grid where normally you'd be consuming power, the visibility of those assets and how those assets are performing and needing to be optimized is very low. And so there's an enormous emerging opportunity in asset visibility and optimization in the grid. It's, again, world's largest man-made machines. And the same is true in manufacturing, how plants and machines are operating, how workforces are operating. When you take one of these big consumer packaged goods companies, they've got tens of thousands of employees building these products, shipping these products. And the visibility into those operational details are not commonly integrated. So maybe my last example is just inside GE. We use a lot of these same digital technologies inside GE. We've looked at our end-to-end processes using Lean across the organization, and we've looked at the quality of the data, the availability of the data, and there's big opportunities there for us in our service delivery, the visibility of which parts go which places, how often have they been repaired, how long is that supply chain, how do you quickly respond, how do you not build too much inventory. Those are all opportunities. We're doing exactly the same thing inside GE across the renewables business, the gas power business, the aviation business, the healthcare business. So really, it's hard to think of an example where there isn't the majority of the data is yet to be used in organizational optimization. And so we are at the early stages of digital transformation of what's possible and what's ahead.
Sure. And in a recent article you wrote about reflecting on your first year as CEO of GE Digital, you mentioned that, initially you had some concerns about, can this be a growth business? However, you've answered them now. So when it comes to growing what is already a very large business and turning that into a growth business, that's a massive challenge. So I would just be excited to hear about, how are you facing this now, and how do you continue to grow GE Digital into the future?
Yeah, so the first thing you got to do when you're trying to grow the business is, are you in good markets? It's hard to grow in a market that's not growing. We are in good markets. The electric grid's a great spot to be in. It's growing. It's more, it's more complex. It's mission critical, and it's going through these transitions. Power generation, oil and gas marketplaces, you mentioned about oil and gas and the importance of the U.S. In each of these places, digital is growing. So, and in manufacturing, digital is growing. So each of these places, the aviation market, data is going to be more and more important. So the good news is these vertical markets are attractive vertical markets for growth. Now the question is, how do we get that growth? And really there's two things broadly that we're working on. The first one is to be sure operationally we're executing really well. We're calling on the customer. We've got strong value propositions, and we're engaged with customers to be sure we understand their business outcomes with crystal clear clarity. Their business outcomes, what are they driving for? How do we deliver a hard ROI in less than a year on digital investments? That's what customers expect. That's what we're focused on. So our service teams, our sales teams, our marketing teams, very focused on ringing the cash register for our customer using digital technologies. We have a tremendous service team. It's an incredible team that is helping customers implement these technologies. So we have this secret weapon of the combination of great talent and technology and the ability to implement at point of impact. Because we can be anywhere in the world with digital transformation, and we're domain experts. We know these markets. That secret weapon, that strategic density from that enables us to engage and deliver for our customers in a very compelling way. So the first thing is you got to like the markets. The second thing is you got to execute a point of impact. The third thing you want to do is to understand what are the problems that are emerging, and how do we be sure we understand the emerging problems and get over those targets so that our R&D team is now focused on really the most important problems that customers are really wanting to solve for the next generation. And then, of course, that's a collaborative innovation process with our top customers. We're not innovating in isolation. We engage with our top customers. Again, we got incredible customer permission with GE because the strength of the brand, the quality of the company, to engage with our customers to understand that innovation agenda. If we do those three things, get over in the right markets, we execute a point of impact, and then we focus on next generation problems that are important to solve, and really understand our customers' business problem they're trying to change. It isn't about our software, it's about the customer business outcome. I think it's a growth business. And in fact, we grew in the second quarter, we'll grow in the second half, and I think the best is yet to come.
Congratulations. Yeah, I couldn't agree more with the way that those markets are moving right now. When it comes to culture, it's interesting because GE is obviously such a well-known brand, and you're entering this organization that's already, has a firmly entrenched culture. Tell us a little bit about what the GE culture is like, and how, as a leader of this large business unit inside GE, how you're thinking about building your own culture at GE Digital.
Yeah, so the GE culture is a remarkable culture. It is a culture deeply committed to customers. How do we focus on customers and deliver for customers and think about customer priorities and respond to customers? It's really a very strong culture. It's also a strong culture technically. This is a real engineering company. It has a lot of technical depth. Really everywhere you go, it's remarkable. It's one of the best engineering in the world. It's certainly in our areas, the best engineering in the world is done at GE. And then it's a global company. This is a company that speaks many languages. It's in every part of the world. Just before the holidays, I was in Algeria and Tunisia. It's remarkable how well GE can execute in Algeria and Tunisia, a place that's halfway around the world. And our GE team has been in those countries for decades. And the culture is built around that, being a global citizen. So those are some of the things that make the GE culture very special. I mean, just a few things. I didn't mention everything, but a few things that come immediately to mind. The things we're trying to, continue to enhance, we want to build on a great culture. So, now we're not tearing down the culture, we're building on it. Some of the things we're really focused on is we're focused in a renewed vigor on continuous improvement. This is the lean journey we're on. And so we're focused on, look, it is about being perfect. It's about how do we get better next month and next quarter and next year and tomorrow, and how do we use daily management to make that happen. So we're focused on continuous improvement. We're focused on candor and transparency, which is how do we be sure that we're getting after the most important issue as rapidly as possible. Speed is a weapon. And if you can solve problems faster than your competitors by having candor and transparency in your organization and being agile and resilient, you're going to win in the marketplace. So those are some things, and those are fairly high level, but within GE Digital, we're fully embracing all those things and really building a great cross-functional teams, intense focus on customers and on execution and on making sure that we're innovating. Some of the things I mentioned about how do you make this a growth business are the things culturally that we're focused on as well.
Right. And when it comes to using data, whether it's in a proprietary GE database or, pulling in data from thousands of different customers and helping them analyze it, obviously, good stewardship and principles, that's at the forefront of everyone's mind. There's a lot of initiatives regarding data for good and generally just, trying to be as thoughtful as possible about the ethical implications of using these large data sets. So when it comes to data for good, how are you thinking about that as a leader?
We have the highest expectations of our teams. I have of myself, of my team, and our customers have of us, of integrity, of making sure that this data is protected. Much of this data it's very valuable data. We focus on making sure that, first of all, that it's protected and well managed. And we're very transparent about that with our customers, how we do that. So that's the first part of good, is probably do no damage, don't cause any harm with it. And then really what we think about is we're on a mission to use this data, to put this data to work. If you think about what work is it being put to, it's being put to the work of providing energy for the world. It's being put to the work of decarbonization. It's being put to the work of orchestrating renewables. It's being put to the work of securing and enabling these global manufacturing companies to deliver goods all over the world. It's being put to the benefit of airline safety, something we actually, frankly, mostly take for granted now. It is an incredible engineering accomplishment, the safety of airplanes. It's an incredible accomplishment. It's like a national treasure, the accomplishment of the airline industry for how safe it is. And GE plays a big role in that, and our digital data plays a big role in that. So my view is data for good is, man, we're in the business of data for good. We are in the business of things like electricity and safety. This is heavy lifting. This is industrial data. The data matters. This data is persistent. And so I'm very proud of that work and how we handle it and then how we use it for good.
Sure. And Patrick, I'd love to rewind a bit. So you have, many decades of experience before this role, whether it's at Hewlett-Packard, Tektronix, Fortive, you're on the board of Micron Technology. And when it comes to this experience, are there any stories that you love to tell again and again that really illustrate, what you think this is all about and why you get out of bed in the morning?
I'm the son of an engineer, so it goes back to when I was a kid. And what I really wanted to do fairly soon after getting out of engineering school was do great technology, but do it with a great team, and then really solve real problems and doing great work. Not just muddling along, but doing great work. And that's just fundamentally motivating to me. And having fidelity for customers, really understanding, moving your focal length to fall in love with the customer problem before we fall in love with the technology. And then to translate that problem into solutions that really do in a very pragmatic, real way with the real people who do the real work at the real customer, using great engineering to deliver that with a great team. And there's just nothing better at work than that. I feel like that combination of we're doing important work, we're on a mission, and then we're working on great teams, and then we're all contributing and we're all developing. We're all on a journey of learning. It's highly energizing because whether it's the customers or it's the technology or it's the teams I'm working on, frankly, the technology, I grew up as an engineer, so it was all about technology. Frankly, it's the people side of the teams I get to work with and the customers we get to serve and the good we get to do. Maybe that sounds overly noble, but that really is what, after nearly 40 years of working, is what gets me out of bed every morning.
Yeah, those seem like returns that compound that you can look back on and really be proud of. When it comes to projects that you're working on now that maybe you're just starting or you're just considering about beginning, how do you go about vetting these ideas? Obviously, you're working with a board, other executives. What's that process like for you when you're exploring a new idea and vetting it? Is it just a conversational process? How do you go about vetting your big ideas?
Yeah, so we use a process which is really a mimic of, it's an example of Agile. So Agile is usually used for software development, but what we've done is we've applied the Agile principles to product definition. So what I mean by that is the first thing we do, I mentioned this earlier, is try to really fall in love with the customer problem first. What is the problem we really want to solve? Let's get a clarity about how many customers have that problem, how big of a problem, is that an emerging problem? So getting high fidelity around the problem that needs to be solved and getting conviction about that. So we spend weeks and months getting conviction about the problems we're solving by talking to customers, many customers that we sell to, customers we don't yet sell to, customers that are different. We talk to engineers, we talk to operators, we talk to procurement people, try to understand those different personas at different kinds of clients, and then build an understanding about what that opportunity looks like if we were able to solve that problem. Then what we do, sort of step two, is to say, how could we solve that problem? And then we're in a highly iterative agile process where we're showing mock-ups to customers. We're getting reactions where sometimes the mock-ups are just a piece of paper. It's just a concept. It's amazing how much feedback you can just by just explaining an idea. And so that iterative process. So really the way to describe this is the first thing we do is deep customer immersion. That's the problems we're trying to solve. Then we do rapid experimentation. And that combination of deep customer immersion and rapid experimentation is the core of our innovation process and how we try to engage with customers while we're also, really having our teams be in the middle of it.
Very cool. Patrick, when it comes to the future and final thoughts, maybe if there's a message, you like to repeat to your teams, I would just be, very appreciative of getting your take on where this technology is going, right? Because we're opening up new frontiers. It's still very early. Ultimately, these are technologies that serve us all, that we all use. Are there any final thoughts here that whether you're talking to your team or any audience, what are some final thoughts about where all this is headed that you'd like to leave us with?
Yeah, so these technologies, I've been working long enough to see these technologies through their life cycles. And we're still very much in the early days of the difference this industrial data technology will matter to all of us. If I just use the example of the cell phone, I was involved early in some of the cell phone business and when the smartphone first came out. And you look at now how our lives have changed as a result of this supercomputer that's in all of our pockets and all the ways that's changed how we interact socially. And now everybody has GPS. Everybody knows everybody knows where you are. And there's so many things that have been enabled that have really changed our daily lives as a result of having a smartphone in our pocket. That's a 15 or 20 year technology trajectory. Now, the industrial markets move at a different pace. It's not a consumer business, but it's software, and software is powerfully organic. It moves forward in a powerful way to grow and grow. And so I think we're at the very early days, and the level of visibility that we're going to get, I think it's going to allow new services to be delivered. It's going to allow us to run operations in a way that allows people at work in manufacturing plants, in airlines, in the oil and gas industry, to get at their fingertips the data that is really needed to deliver even better customer experience, even more efficiency. enable organizations to find new revenue growth. I really do think it's the fuel that enables things we don't yet see. But I think as we put these things together and go down this path of delivering business outcomes, we'll see tremendous potential emerge. And it will be transformative. And just like the cell phone industry, just like any other technology wave, the world 10 years from now will be very different than the world now as a result of, in these markets, as a result of how this data is going to be utilized. It's just a great place for innovation. And it's a great place for focusing on customers. And I'm really excited to be on that journey with the team.
These are exciting times, to say the least. Patrick, thank you so much for opening up and sharing with us today. And to everyone listening, we'll see you next time.
Thank you.
I'm Sophia Bush, and you've been listening to Hidden in Plain Sight from Mission.org. This podcast is sponsored by our friends at Splunk, the Data to Everything platform. In today's data-driven world, every company, big or small, new or old, is sitting on terabytes of unused, untapped, and unknown data. Splunk helps turn all that data into action. Using cutting-edge AI and machine learning, Splunk delivers real-time predictive insights that will help you on your mission to change the world. With solutions for IT, security, Internet of Things, and business operations, Splunk empowers people to make faster, better decisions and take action to get things done. It's time for our data to be more than a record of what happened. It's time to make things happen.